Okay, hello. Today I'm going to talk about this volume, volume 4 of the Correspondence of Sir Ernest Satow, British Envoy in China, 1900 to 1906. This is the third introduction by Dr. Andrew Hillier. So he's done one for volume 1, for volume 2, which covers volume 2 and 3, and this one, volume 4. Okay, and the total is 6 volumes. All right, so here we've got a preface, a brief one by me, not much new there, the introduction, and then a list of persons, which is, let's see, yeah, it's people who appear in each of the files, or who write letters in each of the files. And then the actual content is, well, it's all Satow papers reference PRO 30/33. And then we've got PRO 30/33 9/11, Vice Consul E.C. Wilton from Tibet and so on, etc. 1904 to 1905. We've got 912 has Supreme Court Chief Justice H.S. Wilkinson, that's Hiram Shaw Wilkinson, 1901 to 1906. 913 has H.P. Wilkinson, Claims Commissioner, 1901 to 1902. That's Hiram Parks Wilkinson. 914, British Diplomats Elsewhere, from 1900 to 1903. 915, British Diplomats Elsewhere, 1904 to 1906. 916 is the Colonial and Indian Authorities, 1900 to 1903. 917, Colonial and Indian Authorities, 1904 to 1906. And then we've got military authorities from 918 to 922. 918 is Gaisley, commander of the British forces in China from 1900 to 1901. 919 is his successor, O.M. Cray, 1901 to 1903. 920 is Ventris, 1903 to 1906. And then PRO 30/33, 921 and 922 are from military authorities various. Okay, so that's the basic content of this volume. All right, so I'm going to move now to the introduction by Andrew Hillier. Starts with a quotation, as before. I report the above circumstantial stories as they have been told to me, thinking them more fit for a private letter than an official dispatch. I cannot control the accuracy of the details, though my sources are good enough to convince me of their substantial correctness. This is from PRO 30/33 915. It's letter number 26, original Tower to Satow in August 1905, on page 174 of this volume. Okay, so now we start with the main text. Written shortly after his appointment as minister resident in Bavaria, Reginald Tower's letter to his former chief captures the tone of the contents of this, the 4th volume of Sir Ernest Satow's personal correspondence, covering his 6 years as British minister, Britain's minister in China. As with the 3 previous volumes, it is the private nature of the letters that gives them their special character, allowing the writer to go beyond what could be said in official dispatches and express personal views on both public affairs and individuals in the diplomatic and consular service. Although the topics are interwoven, the contents can be divided into the following principal categories. First, letters relating to the Supreme Court and the administration of justice in Treaty Port, China. Secondly, those covering Sino-British relations and wider geopolitical issues sent by British diplomats in Japan and Korea and from embassies across the world. And thirdly, letters dealing with the aftermath of the Boxer uprising and covering British claims for losses suffered during the uprising, the restoration of political stability, and the withdrawal of British troops from the areas around Peking and Tianjin. While almost all the letters are incoming, the correspondence was generally two-way, and this suggests that Satow must have spent a considerable amount of time on his private correspondence, given that the volume does not include any letters of a more personal nature. For example, there is not a single letter from a woman, which no doubt were also exchanged, albeit intimacy was not one of the minister's more obvious attributes. Judicial correspondence. The judicial correspondence, principally comprising letters from the current Chief Justice, Sir Hiram Shaw Wilkinson, and Judge F.S.A. Bourne, includes discussion of the Chinese government's requests for extradition of Chinese subjects accused of criminal acts. This had become a thorny issue in Sino-British relations following China's defeat by Japan in 1895 and the ensuing wave of revolutionary upheavals against the Qing dynasty. The scale of the political opposition grew after 1898, when a short-lived reform movement ended with the conservatives' coup d'etat and the public execution of 6 reformers, the 2 leaders, Kang Youwei and Liang Qi-chao, having escaped abroad. By the early 1900s, the reformers and rebels were joined by young patriotic Chinese students and intellectuals, many of whom had studied in Japan and yearned for a violent anti-Manchu revolution to establish a Han-dominated republic. Their main avenue for spreading revolutionary ideology was through the treaty port press in Shanghai, and in particular, the newspaper Subao. While the Qing government was keen to suppress what it saw as seditious attacks by these revolutionaries, its ability to administer justice and punish crimes according to its own laws had been significantly weakened due to the expansion of the consular jurisdiction in the treaty ports and other colonial enclaves. Matters came to a head when, alarmed by the publication and dissemination of incendiary material in the international settlement, the Qing government requested the foreign municipal police, with the consent of the senior consul, to arrest the publishers of the paper and hand them over to the Chinese authorities. The legal basis for extradition had been prescribed by Article 21 of the Treaty of Tianjin, 1858, which stipulated that Chinese offenders taking refuge in houses or on board the vessels of British subjects in open ports should be delivered up upon due requisition to the British consul. In practice, this had become subject to a number of conditions. In particular, the alleged offence had to be one extraditable under British law and thus not one of a political nature, a concept which would give rise to much controversy, especially after the coup d'etat in 1898. And there's a footnote at this point. For the early history of this concept in Sino-British relations, see Jenny Huangfu Day, The Enigma of a Taiping Fugitive, The Illusion of Justice and the Political Offence Exception in Extradition from Hong Kong. Law and History Review, 2021, pages 1 to 36. That's Andrew Hillier. I'm grateful to Jenny Huangfu Day for contributing to this section on extradition. So we continue in the main text. Linked to the issue was the question whether, if extradited, the defendant would be subject to torture or other inhumane treatment, or would be unlikely for any other reason to receive a fair trial. As will be seen, these issues were raised with Sato by Sir Henry Blake, the governor of Hong Kong. See PRO 30/33/9/16 in this volume. They also arose in connection with the Subao case, following the gruesome execution of reformer Shen Jin by a secret order from the Empress Dowager, which was sufficient to convince the British authorities that the defendants would not receive a fair trial if extradited. As a result, the case was heard by the mixed court, and the letters from the Chief Justice and Bourne show the complex legal issues that could arise and the degree to which the minister was willing to discuss such cases, including what length of imprisonment would be appropriate by reference to the law of seditious libel in England. In the event, the sentences imposed on the 2 defendants were close to what Wilkinson had suggested, namely 2 and 3 years. What is striking about the correspondence in this section is how far Sato, as British minister, thought it permissible to go when discussing pending cases with the Chief Justice. Global correspondence. By the time he arrived in Peking in the autumn of 1900, Sato had built up a global range of correspondence, including those who had served under him and others with whom he had enjoyed close working relationships. With international rivalry intensifying during this period, the letters discuss not only Chinese affairs, but also wider geopolitical issues. The build-up of the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905, is described from a number of vantage points. From Japan by Sato's predecessor, Sir Claude MacDonald, from Korea by John Jordan, and from St. Petersburg, where Cecil Spring Rice was chargé d'affaires. Writing in March 1904, Russia was, he said, confident of success and setting its sights on acquiring Manchuria and Chile and Persianizing its influence over the Qing. But by May that year, it was already sustaining major reversals, which would lead to its catastrophic defeat the following year. Although ostensibly neutral, Britain had tacitly supported Japan, and the subsequent correspondence focuses on the impact the outcome would have on British interests in the area, including Korea. By September 1906, according to Consul Meyrick Hewlett, writing from Seoul, there were some 75,000 Japanese in the country, and the judicial system was at breaking point, giving rise to issues that Sato's successor, Sir John Jordan, would have to address. That's letter number 38, Hewlett to Sato, 6th of September 1906, page 194 in this volume, and it's PRO reference, PRO 30/33/9/15. From Morocco, J.M. MacLeod, who had served under Sato during his time in the country as British minister, 1893 to 1895, detailed Germany's attempts to challenge French dominance in the area, events which would lead to the Treaty of Algeciras, April 1906, and to Germany being increasingly seen as the main threat to European stability. From Germany itself, Tower reported on a meeting which had taken place between the Kaiser and the Tsar on board a yacht in the Baltic in the summer of 1905, during which the Kaiser had talked endlessly about forging alliances and political combinations, including one with the United States, in order to strengthen Germany's position in the Far East. That's letter number 26, Tower to Sato, in August 1905, in the same PRO file, PRO 30/33/9/15. From Constantinople, Sir Walter Townley, recently appointed secretary to the British Embassy, described the ambassador, Sir Nicholas O'Connor, who had previously served as minister in Peking, attending the port, which was the Turkish Foreign Ministry, where he rattles along in the most fluent French, pronounced with an indescribable Irish accent. Discussing issues in relation to Armenia, Macedonia, and Bulgaria, the letters provide a foretaste of future problems in the Balkans. Shortly afterwards, to his surprise and delight, Townley was transferred to the embassy in Washington, and from there, he was able to provide Sato with the American perspective on global events, in particular, the Chinese boycott of American goods, which had just begun to bite. Aftermath of the Boxer Uprising. Set against this global perspective, the next section covers events taking place closer to home in the wake of the Boxer Uprising. Taking over from MacDonald only 1 month after the lifting of the siege of the legations, Sato had the task of restoring political stability, whilst also ensuring the punishment of those who were seen as the principal culprits, so that China could begin rebuilding its infrastructure and be in a position to withstand the predatory designs of the other major powers, principally France, Germany, and Russia, but soon to be joined by Japan. The correspondence reflects many of the complex issues to which this gave rise. And there's a footnote at this point. For a discussion of some of these issues, see James Hillier, English Lessons, The Pedagogy of Imperialism in 19th Century China, Durham, NC, that's North Carolina, I think, Duke University Press, 2003, in particular, Chapter 7, A Reign of Terror, Punishment and Retribution in Beijing and its Environs. The correspondence reflects many of the complex issues to which this gave rise. Much of it is with the British military authorities, including Generals Gaisley and O'Moore Cray, successively the commanders of the China Field Force. The new legation compound required proper defenses, a permanent legation guard had to be established, and the withdrawal of Britain's military occupation around Peking and Tianjin, Tianjin, had to be managed so as to ensure that control was not surrendered to the rival powers. Of particular concern was the issue of the Northern Railway, over which Russia was keen to retain control, much to the concern of the Hong Kong Bank, which was determined to protect the interests of the mainly British bondholders. Following the siege, the administration of the line running between Peking and Shanghai Quan, that is within the wall, had initially fallen to the British military authorities, but in the course of 1902, it was transferred to the Chinese civil administration. However, there was continuing rivalry over the remainder of the line, which extended beyond the wall. And again, there's a footnote. Frank King, The Hong Kong Bank in the Period of Imperialism and War, 1895 to 1918, Wei Fung, The Focus of Wealth, Volume 2 of the History of the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, Cambridge University Press, 1988, page 351. There were a number of issues relating to the small colonial enclave of Weihai Wei, including the controversial proposal to disband the 1st Chinese Regiment, which had seen loyal service first at Tianjin and then at Peking, but about which unpleasant and unfounded rumors fueled by notions of racial superiority were circulating. It would be disbanded shortly before Sato retired. A cerebral minister. Threading through the volume are numerous other issues which, to a greater or lesser extent, were of concern or interest to Sato. It is one of these that begins the volume, and although the subject matter is of minor interest, it casts light on Sato and the way in which he sometimes dealt with his staff. Sir Ernest Wilton, as he later became, had served as an assistant to Colonel Francis' young husband, the Commissioner for Tibetan Frontier Matters, and in a clutch of letters, sought to persuade Sato to pressurize the Qing to endorse the Lhasa Agreement, which had been concluded between Britain and Tibet in September 1904, with a view to opening the country to British merchants, and no doubt the letters were retained and filed by Sato for that reason. However, while that was their ostensible purpose, the discursive nature of the letters suggests they may also have been written as a way of currying favor with the minister before Wilton returned to the consular service. If so, he was to be disappointed because just before leaving for China, he learned that he had not been promoted as he had expected. And it is Sato's note on Wilton's telegram seeking reasons that is particularly instructive. It reads, "Inclined to recommend him for Consul General at Yunnan Fu, but recent utterances of his have made me doubt his judgment, tact, and discretion. I do not intend to answer questions such as these put by Mr. Wilton, and least of all when they come to me by telegram en clair, in other words, not coded." This is in PRO 30/33/9/12. Telegram number 8/242 given at Calcutta, 24th of October, 1905, page 14 of this volume. Here we see Sato at his most acerbic, and as many came to know and some to fear him, someone who did not suffer fools gladly, or at least those he regarded as fools, and who, although fair, could be extremely abrupt in his dealings with the consular staff. But, as can also be seen in these letters, he enjoyed excellent relations with those whom he did respect. As Walter Townley wrote whilst on leave in England, "I shall never forget all your kindness, for which I shall always remain truly grateful. I shall continue to have the most pleasant memories of the time I served under your orders, during all of which you treated me with far more than my due share of consideration." This is from PRO 30/33/9/15, letter number 2, Townley to Sato, 13th of January, 1904, page 137 in this volume. Along with the discussion of public affairs, there are occasional glimpses in the letters of Sato's more personal side. MacLeod writes of his engagement to the fair and evangelical Elizabeth Agnes Brown, Hewlett of the imminent arrival of his first child, and Townley of the dispatch of a lawnmower that his wife, Lady Susan Townley, had purchased for Sato in England. Lord Curzon inquires about the possibility of Sato acquiring on his behalf some pieces of jade, porcelain, or lacquer, which had been looted and subsequently auctioned. And H.S. Wilkinson looks to purchase a suitable all-weather carriage for his use, either a landau or brougham. And as in previous volumes, there are references to plants and plant hunting, one of Sato's passions. including a letter from the Botanic Gardens, Hong Kong, thanking him for the seeds and specimens he had collected and sent to the country's colonial herbarium. A bachelor with little time for the legation's cohort of young and boisterous student interpreters, although he had once been one himself, there was just a handful of diplomatic and consular staff and their wives with whom Satow could socialize, and of these, only a few would live up to his high standards. During Peking's long, dark winter evenings, the correspondence in this and the preceding volumes, part personal, part semi-official, must have provided an important and welcome outlet for this most cerebral of men. Andrew Hillier, January 2022. So there we are. That's really very good and very interesting, I think. So thank you very much for listening and watching if you have been. That's the point where I will end this video. Goodbye.